Good afternoon, Berlin. Good afternoon, Potsdam. Lungs of history. Have you ever experienced absolute loss? More than grief. It's deep down inside. Every cell screams. You can hear nothing else. Lichen Palmer, Laura's Secret Diary, Twin Peaks, 1990, Season 2, Episode 4. The first footnote for Chapter 4. 1. The opening quote to this chapter is uttered when a prominent member of the Twin Peaks community is finally confronted with the fact that he has murdered who he believed to be his daughter's killer. It is a desperate moment indeed. However, it also emerges that Mr. Lichen Palmer has been involved in the shady financial dealings of his boss, Benjamin Horn. He is therefore also culpable, enmeshed within the sordid affairs that underpin Twin Peaks. Following his wrathful vengeance, misplaced as it is, he goes on to replicate the actions of his daughter's murder precisely. Inhabited as he has now become by the bloodlust of an occupying spirit. In order to truly account for the proliferation of classical architecture across the modern world, one must look at violence and the economy. It is unpleasant to acknowledge that most neoclassical architecture was built either by enslaved persons or with the profits garnered from the labour of such enslaved persons, often both. This is what architectural historian Mabel O. Wilson refers to as constructing whiteness. The last chapter, while extending its skeletal arm from the cemetery into the artistic decoration of the Bundesnachrichtendienst in the year 2016, closes at circa 300 in the Common Era. Baroque architecture, while extending the lineage of ancient and neoclassical floral motifs, will also provide the lungs with which, so to speak, this history breathes. Pants, whines, chokes, coughs, and gasps. Baroque is the splendour of blood money. It is silver plugged into the wounds of the flailing European nation-state. Only most of the blood has been spilt in the colonies of South America. In this sense, I can speak of a broader dynamic in which colonial conquest attempts to service the entropy that has caught up with the imperfection of market solutions. The vivid splendour of the Baroque cannot therefore be forced from the death machines put into operation to ensure the survival of such markets and the surplus populations they subsequently create. So going off-piste for a second there, people who are just joining us, if you hear the whistle, it means that I'm going to start adding to the book, or maybe taking away, but in any case, the thing I'm about to say won't be found in the book. I'm also going to do this when I read the captions, because I'll often add content that has sort of emerged in the last 4 years. I literally just wanted to make a simple point about the idea of creating surplus populations. Of course, I don't take the position that they're surplus. Yeah, that's just what I wanted to say. I don't think that was 100% clear. The Baroque period is a prime target for the discussion of cultural epigenetics, precisely because of the strong dynamic between physical violence and art. The nimble morticians of such a dynamic collated and examined the evidence in the group exhibition The Potosi Principle, quote, "How can we sing the song of the Lord in an alien land?" unquote, curated by Alice Grisha, Silvia Rivera Cuscagni, Andreas Siegmann, and Max Jorg Hindra in 2010. The exhibition places slavery and colonial resource grabbing explicitly within the frame of art production, brackets, and vice versa, close brackets, under the dominant Western forces within viceroyal Peru, 1542 to 1824. The artworks in question here are dramatic, bloody, near comical depictions of hell. They are born from the guts of the colonial apparatus of the Spanish in Potosi, modern-day Bolivia, which has so recently thrown off United States imperialism to place Evo Morales back in power. Baroque architecture and art are widely acknowledged to have been a part of the counter-reformational sense-making and knowledge production that swept through European thought in the 16th century. Through the triumph of new building techniques, churches and other buildings created in the Baroque style exhibit rib-like details. These details recall the concept of historical breaths, of sacred and reproductive spaces, pumping out religious and economic ideology into and beyond the city itself. If the classical and Baroque buildings I am studying, those adorned with Corinthian columns, gargoyles and Osiris-inspired green men, were organs of power, I would make them the lungs. But what does it mean, sense-making? Is it accounting? Is it Catholicism? Or is it universal man? The term universal man is clearly self-contradictory. It is tied to the unreliable Roman historian Vitruvius by Italian polymath Leonardo da Vinci in his Axis Mundi of the same name. Nevertheless, universalism, brackets, in the image of white European man, close brackets, was the ideal borne by waves of gilded acanthus leaves during the early modern period, which celebrated breakthroughs in mathematics and science as revelatory of life's eternal truths. It was not long before universal forms of morality followed, with equal enthusiasm, into the lives of those conquered by settler colonialism. The early modern period is also the dawn of the architect proper, detached from the act of construction. This shift from the practitioner or mason to the formalized architect as architect is significant, given the forthcoming colonial dissemination of classical and Baroque culture during 1500 to 1600 and beyond. For as Mabel O. Wilson states, these movements brought their ideological universalism to the far corners of the earth, including the so-called Rich Mountain of Potosi. I'm going to do the description of the image on the opposite page. To begin with, the caption is Francesco Borrimi, Sant Ivo, Rome. The continuous inner surface of the dome is broken up. It is made to transit the movement which runs throughout the whole elevation. So the image locates the viewer underneath the dome of the cathedral of the church, and we look up in sort of typical Baroque fashion at this very elegant, or I don't know if it's even elegant. It's more like it's just very dramatic and has lots of stars. Okay, so I'll try and be objective. I try and do objective description, subjective description. I mean, we've got angels positioned around the opening up to the sort of light well that occupy these chambers, which are then sort of carved back into the space of the dome, which are then lined on both sides with star-shaped relief work, and there is a circle of sort of star relief, and it's very fancy to try and give it a technical phrase. And on the next image, on the next page, we have this kind of idea of ribs, which is of course being worked out on the inside of the cathedral. So you have these technical advances in mathematics which allow people to structure more intricate and complex interior decoration as part of the structure of the building. So that's something which also you see in the Gothic period. And this idea then is that because there's more sort of undulation in the architecture, that you have a sort of rib cage emerging. And so the next image is an exterior shot, and the caption is Balthasar Neumann, Vierzen Heiligen, detail of the undulating wall of the facade, as referenced by Gideon, and we're going to get some Gideon stuff shortly. Baroque art, like the Baroque architecture of 16th century colonial South America, therefore constitutes a form of moralizing cultural hegemony which ran parallel to the normalization of violence. If, as architectural historian Siegfried Gideon writes, the Baroque was a structure of feeling for an age whose architects worked in confrontation with the infinite and the presence of God within all things, when it came to race, the period was certainly less than infinite in its scope. What did seem to reach infinity during this period was national debt. For example, during colonialism and later imperialism, debt-ridden inter-European conflict spread across the globe, quote, rationalizing, unquote, its violent behaviour in the name of the Lord as they went. One argument for this is that, quote, non-European territories which do not share the peculiar European idea of property and society, and thus do not have the strange problem of, quote, overproduction, unquote, are labelled, quote, generally backward in history, unquote, Hegel, and therefore become legitimate prey of colonist expansion. Sene Serequeberhan, 1989, page 311. In a conversation published in the exhibition catalogue of the Potosi Principle, Jorg Louis Marceau describes the way in which, brackets, despite its appeal to the universal, close brackets, the Baroque as a concept represents a form of Spanish and European intellectual closure. Quote, in 1898, when the US took over Spanish colonies in Cuba, Puerto Rico and the Philippines, there was this deep reflection amongst the intellectuals of Spain. We had an empire, we lost an empire, and now? What can we call the old times? So some intellectuals conceived of the idea of the Baroque not as a style, but as a thing that could have many facets. unquote. That's Ibid, the Potosi Principle Catalogue, page 229. As a way to rationalize the violence and chaos of the period, one can read the idea of closure here as an attempt, brackets, which one could also argue has been quite successful, close brackets, to reorder the events of the past. In short, to create something new from those elements which could still fit into the post-colonial Spanish national brand. If, as Marzo contends, quote, the Baroque definition comes from the enlightened intellectuals who somehow wanted to establish a new classical style, unquote, which is to say, an attempt at intellectual closure for the rationalism and romanticism of the European North, it may also inform the concept of the quote-unquote great ages of history. What the Baroque reveals to me is that one is never looking at a single instance of an artwork or building, but rather a continuation of porous forms. The painting El Inferno di Cacrivi, Inferno, Hell, by Master of Cacrivi 1739, is a double articulation of a genre, where genre, quote, is like a codified system of principles of ideas or values that make up a viewing experience, unquote. Because, to continue the quote from US playwright Brendan Jacob Jenkins, generic work is about unifying the people who can share the same moral codes or signs of that genre. Witness, for example, the closed delimitation of the style and the quote-unquote infinity of forms depicted therein. The artworks from this period detailed in the Potosi Principle, paintings such as El Inferno di Cacrivi, are evolutions of a painterly form that reflect the contested space of the image until today. If I wanted to describe these paintings as deviant, I would locate the swerve away from the genre as the reaction of the indigenous artist against the cultural imperialism imposed by the Spanish. It is a form of painting which performs the dominant cultural expression while concurrently appropriating its tropes, style and language. The former, a testament to the savagery of the European, depicted precisely in our most profound register. The latter, a gesture towards the immutable human spirit through time. Two breaths drawn with great care and discomfort, like a patient with broken ribs. Two articulations that nonetheless operate within cultural contradictions, brackets, through hegemonic control and transgression, close brackets. Antarctica's work in the Potosi Principle, World Map, describes the effect that global mapping had on the collective imagination during the decline of allegorical or figurative sense-making. As Manuel J. Boya Villel, director of the Museo Nacional Centro de Arte Reina Sofía, Madrid, writes in the catalogue's foreword, here, culture is not the independent and privileged site of ideas. It not only reflects a power structure, but is the very power which is fought over, unquote. I am confronted with just how little has changed. So I need to jump into a quick description of the lavish painting on the following 4 pages. It's Cacrivi's Inferno or Hell, and it really feels like he's got a good grip on that as a subject. There's just this gigantic sort of pit that could even be a sort of intestinal tract or stomach beneath the earth, with demons prowling across the land and sending would-be conquistadors, merchants, and their entourage into this kind of inferno of spiked wheels in rotation and bodies hung upside down while serpents slither about their person, and others being fed into the giant maw of, I don't even know what that is. It could be a snake. It's certainly demonic. There are cauldrons full of burning bodies. There are demons prodding bodies and chains around necks, wrists, ankles, waists, pulling these poor figures, these poor wretches, in many different directions simultaneously. Dragons look on with somewhat demure and sad expressions. And above ground, the trade continues. Both in the dehumanizing conditions of the informal labor which underpins the spectacular acquisition of wealth, in, for example, contemporary Dubai, and the art which serves as a legitimizing veneer with which to conceal class violence. Quote, "The silver from Potosi was extracted by the tens of thousands of Indios working in forced labor under deadly conditions. It then spread throughout the world and expanded through the creation of the British and Dutch East India Companies." Unquote. Artika's world map makes explicit the decline of the allegorical in the face of global exploration and cartography. However, the map-making of the period was limited to the coastal regions of these quote-unquote new worlds, which also served to deny the organic complexity of life beyond the surveyor's line of sight. For example, as the Dutch would go on to mimic in Indonesia, quotes, "The Spanish developed an elaborate system of hierarchical racial categorization. Initially based on skin color and country of origin, the Sociedad de Castas operated in reverse order of prestige from persons of African descent, who may previously have been enslaved, up to mestizos in the middling ranks and Spanish at the climax of the racial pyramid.